Hello, viewers. I'm Allie Gordon.
And I'm Emma Kirby.
Two of the broadcast students who have worked on this special episode of At Mac. Today we'll be talking about the Oklahoma City bombing. The attack on the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building on April 19, 1995 remains the deadliest attack by domestic terrorists in the United States.
In these two special interviews, we talked to U.S. history teacher Mr. David Holland about the history of the bombing and the resulting reactions. We then interviewed Mr. Terry Brandenburg and Mrs. Kimberly Eppes, two of our MMS teachers who served in the military and were activated to help with the recovery efforts immediately after the attack.
Welcome to a special episode of At Mac. I'm Cole Heirigs, and joining us today is our 8th grade history teacher, Mr. Holland. He's here to help us learn more about the Oklahoma City bombing and the impact the attack made on our state and our country. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So, do you remember where you first were when you heard the news?
Yes, it was, growing up, there weren't a whole lot of instances like this in the United States. We always heard on the TV, things outside of the country. And even if they were in the country, they were, on the far East Coast or West Coast. It wasn't really something close to home. And I remember walking into, it was actually a U.S. history class with Mr. Harrington. And back then, we thought we were big time when we had big TVs in each room. And on the TV, it was there. And, of course, we had no idea what was going on. We just knew that something terrible had happened close to home. So they came in very quickly after that and told us, hey, you got to turn the TVs off. We don't want you to, watch this because there may be some connection. There may be a family member or a friend that works in Oklahoma City that works in that environment, and they don't want to see the news on, of their death or injury or whatever on TV. So we had to turn it off. But for the rest of the day, it was what in the world's going on, and trying to find information and gather the information. It was kind of interesting. And, being in high school, these things weren't really important to me. They were, because obviously loss of life and close to home and things of that nature. But as far as, why, we didn't know. And so there were a lot of questions that had to be answered still.
So whenever you walked into that high school class and you saw that, what were your thoughts?
Just utter shock, I think, and again, we've seen on TV before, we saw, destruction, we saw things messed up and destroyed, but, this is an hour away from our home, and so, people that we may be connected to, people that we may know, they've been affected, and so it hit closer to home to us. It really did. And then, the question that came to mind right off the bat is, who did that? How, is it one person? Is it, an organization? Nobody just really knew what was going on. And prior to that, Oklahoma City bombing, there was a situation in Waco, Texas, the Branch Davidian. There were some issues there with the federal government coming in. And anyway, that was kind of one of our thoughts as well, is, hey, this is going to be a connection. This is another group that's kind of extremist out there. And so we just didn't know, And like I said before, I was not in tune with a lot of the political issues or, actions of the day. And so, but when it hit in Oklahoma City, it was tough.
So what was the damage emotionally whenever this attack happened?
Emotionally for me, like I said, I wasn't really invested in it. I really was not in tune with all of the, situations that the United States has been involved in, both foreign and domestic. So I really didn't care too much for me. But like I said, when I found out that it was close to home, and it's like, man, that's right up the street. And, after the days go by, you talk to people and they say, hey, yeah, we live in, Elgin, or we live just north of Elgin, and Chickasha, and we could feel the ground shake. And, when then you look at the pictures of the building aftermath, and you realize, wow, I can understand that, and I've heard people say before that, on Fort Sill they heard some of the ground shaking, and, okay, if they say so, then I guess you have to believe them. But for me, I never felt anything. It was just a normal day, and then I see the pictures on TV. So as far as emotions, at first it was, okay, that's, I feel for the loss of life, but then, man, whoa, then it takes it to another level because it's just in your backyard.
What have we learned since the attack happened?
I hope a lot, to be honest with you. First off, when you heard the report of who it was, they found out kind of who they thought did it. Timothy McVeigh and a gentleman by the name of Terry Nichols. You thought, okay, these two guys masterminded this whole plan. And, come to find out they did, and they had their motives or whatever. I hope that we learn that, it can happen anywhere. And you got to be, as an individual, as a citizen, you got to be aware of your surroundings and always be open-minded, but, keep your eyes out, for things that are out of the ordinary. And hopefully we learn that there are crazy people in this world, and it doesn't matter where they are. They'll try to do something to you because they believe differently, and whether it's, violent or not, but you just got to be aware of that. And it can happen anywhere. We always think that things happen across the ocean, in Europe, and you see these trains being bombed, and you see these things in, third world countries. But hey, man, this stuff can happen right here in our backyard.
So how did the public react whenever this happened?
I think there was a lot of confusion right off the bat because, again, none of this is the heartland. This is, down home, good people. There's not a lot of, extremists, I guess you could say, that are public. It's a very laid-back atmosphere, even though, there's industries and there's all kinds of different things here. It's kind of a laid-back atmosphere. So here there was a lot of confusion, especially going off the very first, hour, 2 hours, what's happening, who is it, and all that kind of stuff. And then you start to see the pictures roll in. And, there's a famous picture, and I don't remember who took it or, the background story of it, but it was a firefighter pulling out a young child, a baby, carrying it. And, of course, the baby is, I believe, passed on, but it was bloodied, and that seemed to be the picture wherever you saw the Oklahoma City bombing in 1995. That was the picture. And people were confused, but they were scared. Because, like I said, this has never happened before. Again, it's almost like we were immune to it. Those kind of things don't happen in here. And now it's like, whoa, we have to take a reality check. And it was tough. It was tough.
How did this impact the city and the state?
I don't know necessarily in all regards. Because, like I said, I was in high school and then I went to college. And, being in college and being in the real world a little bit different. But I do know that there were tighter restrictions from that point forward on all federal buildings. You had to have more security. They built some things in future buildings to where you couldn't pull up next to a building like that. You had to drive around, or there was some type of security or something like that. And I do remember that after that, people were scared. So I was driving home one day, that day, and I noticed that, man, there were a lot of people that were trying to fill up their gas tanks because they didn't know what happened. Is this something that's going to happen further? Is there more things that are to come? And so, as far as that city and state impact, I think that, tighter restrictions, security on federal buildings.
Do you remember the feeling from yourself and the public when Timothy McVeigh was found guilty and then executed? Obviously, people are going to have different emotions, but for me, there was a sense of satisfaction that they found somebody and they found him guilty, and to kill that many people for whatever reason you have, there's consequences, and you got to put your faith and trust in God and the judicial system and the justice system that we have. And it went through the process. And of course, there were people that said, hey, this guy, he couldn't mastermind it. He wasn't smart enough. And then the gentleman that was with him, Terry Nichols, those two, they couldn't do that. Well, you just have to have faith in the system itself. And so I just think that I know for me personally, satisfaction that they got somebody to be responsible for that, and will it ever, and him being executed, will that bring back those lives? Obviously not. And, but again, for some families, there may be some type of a closure. For me, again, it's just, I'm glad that,
there's, again, a bookend. There's an ending to this, that, hey, there was somebody that was found guilty, and, there's a price to pay.
Did you have any loved ones up there?
I did not. I didn't have anybody that I knew up there. I had friends of friends, but as far as a personal connection or a personal attachment, I did not have anybody up there, no.
So with most young people not knowing about this, what do you think is the most important thing that they learn about this?
And I'm going to kind of take it back to any event for that matter, and that's part of the reason that, in my classes we go back and we look at history, because if you don't study history, if you don't learn from it, then you are going to repeat it. And again, those are things that can be good or bad. And so I hope that people remember that there were sacrifices, and there was the firefighters, the first responders, those that were helping in every way. That they don't have to be first responders, but that it doesn't matter who you are, you can help in a situation like that. And remember that these things can happen anywhere, and you just got to be aware. You got to be vigilant, and we appreciate all the people that have fought and that have, and again, done things for us, and as far as protecting us and saving us and keeping us, healthy, and if we get injured, all this kind of stuff. So we thank them, and those are things we got to remember.
Thanks again for joining us, Mr. Holland. This ends the first part of the interview. We'll take a short break and return to Brody Brown, Mr. Brandenburg, and Miss Eppes.
Thank you.
Welcome to a special episode of At Mac. I'm Brody Brown. Today joining me are Mr. Brandenburg and Mrs. Eppes to talk about their experiences with the Oklahoma City bombing. Thank you for coming. Before we begin, will you explain to our listeners what your task was in April 1995 when you got activated to this tragedy?
At the time, I was in the Oklahoma Army National Guard, and my unit got called up. Most of our battalion helped pull security around the site. However, my company became a part of a joint FBI ATF task force, and we were tasked with recovering body parts, personal effects, and evidence.
Okay, I was stationed at Tinker Air Force Base for the 507th Fighter Squadron. I'm actually a munitions specialist, and so when they brought us in, they actually had me actually be the kind of like standing guard to make sure people didn't come in and out throughout the area.
Yeah, can you walk us through the day that you found out about the attack?
Well, I'd worked late the night before, and one of my buddies had called me and said, "Oh my God, did you hear it?" And he actually lived in the west part of Stillwater, and they felt the blast. And it's turned on the TV, and you got to see that chaos. So I call my units to check in with them. They're like, "We don't have an order yet, so get your stuff ready, but wait by the phone."
Well, I had just gone home to Lawton on leave, and actually seen it on TV, and called my parents to let them know that I was going back to Tinker Air Force Base. I didn't even have to wait for a phone call. I packed my stuff and went back up there.
When did you know that you were going to have to help at the site of the bombing?
The second I turned on the TV.
Just right away you knew with your job at the time that this was something that you were going to have to do?
National Guard are citizen soldiers, and one of our big things is helping out in state emergencies. Usually it's tornadoes, but this time it was a domestic terrorist attack.
How did you feel about being activated in response to the attack?
I've never worked so hard in my life and been embarrassed to get paid for it. That's what we do. When there's something like that, you go, and you just, I didn't know at the time what our job was going to be, and again, never worked so hard and been embarrassed to get paid for it.
I don't know if I had a feeling. I just knew that that's something that we were going to have to do, and unfortunately, being stationed here in Oklahoma, it was what we did.
At that point, it was just instinct?
Mm-hmm.
What were your tasks at the site of the attack? You kind of went into this earlier about.
Well, you had a huge rescue effort going on in the city. But at the same time, that building was a crime scene. And as they were pulling things away from the building, they were then putting them in containers to move to another site, that the whole time maintaining a chain of evidence for these things in the attack. My group dug through a pile of rubble that was about 8 feet high, 20 feet wide, 25 feet, and about 100 yards long, and had things to where it took several people to move the objects to a bobcat to take away. Things where it'd be 4 men lifting stuff and moving it to basketball size, and then we had a team going behind on our hands and knees, sifting through everything. We were finding splinters from the floor of that Ryder truck, all kinds of bits of plastic that were blue and white, and those were from the barrels that they put the explosives in. We did have part of the daycare center in my pile, and there was a little frog hand puppet that I can, decades later, still see it and remember how angry I was over someone doing something like this and killing children. We were pretty upset by that.
It also gives you motivation to find what happened there. But for me, I was stationed outside of the site, but also being that munitions specialist, I kind of knew how bombs operate, how that stuff. So we were like the outside looking in to see, if there was anything I could contribute to that part. But most of the time I was there to secure the site, make sure that people did get in, even though people did get in. But it was just one of those, it was a large crime scene, so it's really hard to make sure that there's all people belong there or don't belong there kind of deal. So
Yeah. And you speak of y'all going in and carrying rubble and debris out of the site, I guess.
Yeah.
And I see right there you have a piece of
Camera. Afterwards, the FBI had given my unit several pieces of, I think it's granite, that were part of the steps of the building. I've wanted to have it engraved with the date and time of the attack, but I'm scared somebody's going to mess it up, and it's something that's priceless. It can't be. It's priceless. But what I like is that I can share that with students, and it's a part of history, and that you can just reach out and touch and understand a little bit about what happened on that day.
Yeah. What were your most impactful memories that you still have from that day?
I still get emotional when I see the pictures, or especially when you get around this time and they're starting to bring it back out and everything, it still, I don't know, it still brings tears. It still makes me angry. It still, even though it's been, almost 27 years, it still has an impact.
I'm embarrassed to have been paid for it, but I'm so proud of, what my soldiers did. And every day, at the end of the day, they would fly over and take a photograph of how we're moving through these piles. And the FBI in Washington, D.C. was like, hey, this group's moving too fast. And I'm like, no, we're just the most efficient. And I promise you, these were Oklahomans that were killed. This building is where I joined the military. My battalion had family members in that building that were killed. This was personal, and you didn't have to tell us to do our best. Each day I would end up going through a pair of work gloves, getting torn up with all the materials. And I told you this before, my group found the axle to that Ryder truck that they were able to trace down who had rented it. I'm very proud of my soldiers and what we did. I'm very proud of the people in Oklahoma that came and supported us in every shape, manner, and form.
What were your thoughts when law enforcement announced that they had got one of the bombers in Timothy McVeigh?
Well, the OHP trooper that arrested Timothy McVeigh had also written my mother a speeding ticket before. Trooper Hanger, very professional. I was proud again of our people in Oklahoma when McVeigh was led out of the courthouse there in Perry, and he wasn't shot by somebody in the crowd, that he was booed, and the FBI were able to take him away from there. Regardless of how people felt, they controlled their emotions and acted appropriately.
How does this event still today impact your life? I know that y'all talk about how closer and closer to this time of year it gets heavier and it's always on your mind, but now it becomes more apparent than ever.
I think I still feel it's personal. It's still part of me. I don't think it will ever go away. But the thing is that I'm happy that I can share this with other people because it's not something I've really ever talked about. I have not ever been to the memorial. I still can't bring myself to walk up to it. And I know it's not there, but that even after 27 years, I still see it.
Yeah.
I still know what happened.
I tend, I want to share this stuff with my students, but I also sometimes forget about my own children that are in school. And, for them, it's like, hey, Dad did this stuff. It was just doing our job. And the people that are involved, we find out later, are veterans, people that were supposed to, protect Americans, not attack and kill people that had nothing to do with anything. And obviously the daycare part hurts. I just want, people to know what happened with what everybody did coming together to be able to rescue people in the building and also put the evidence together to convict McVeigh and Nichols. There was a photograph of evidence I saw on CNN while they're doing the prosecution. I was standing behind the photographer when he took that photograph, and we were just doing what you're supposed to do, and that's help out. And it wasn't until years later you realize the impact of just what our role is and how few people in the entire nation were there and did our jobs.
Is there anything you believe our listeners should know about this day in the aftermath?
Just know I wasn't born and raised Oklahoma, but at this moment I'm proud to be an Oklahoman, and just know that with that day it pulled people together. They worked side by side. There was no differences there. It's just you were an Oklahoman, you were there, you were doing something to help each other out. And it stayed after that. I mean, even a few years later, it's still, you're proud to be an Oklahoman. I just don't want people to forget that, just to be proud of who you are.
And we established what, the Oklahoma standard. Doctors and nurses from around the state, when they saw it, if they could, they just headed to Oklahoma City. There was a man who had like a food truck serving barbecue. When he saw it, he just packed up everything and went because he knew that people were going to need to eat. They were working. All the restaurants bringing those guys food. We had the Red Cross feed us chili mac. Just, the pulling together. Everything was put aside. Politics, OU issue, that got put aside. It was just doing what you can to help fellow Americans, fellow Oklahomans, or our community.
Yeah, I can only imagine, Miss Eppes, you, both of y'all, obviously in more you saw the emotion of people trying to get to loved ones and friends and family there. Like, I don't know if
It's yes, it's the emotions that come, feelings, because there's nothing I can answer. I can't tell you who was there, who was a part of it, if they've survived it. I mean, a lot of people knew that there was daycare there. You know, are there any kids? I mean, there is that picture that has that child that was Bailey, you know, and I didn't know the child. But, I mean, we see it, but we don't know. I can't tell you anything. Like, you know, that was the hardest part, was to turn people away with no answers.
I can remember a few weeks later going to my drill weekend, and I'm getting gas, and someone there, this is in Oklahoma City, asked me directions to downtown where the Murrah building was. And I'm like, really thrown for a loop by this. And he's like, I want my son to see this. This is a part of history now. And the fact that someone was coming from Missouri so that their child could see what had happened and what some truly evil men had done, I get it now.
it all makes sense and comes today, nearly 27 years later.
Yeah. I'm one of a very small group of people that got an award for this, and I'm proud of it, but at the same time, I'm embarrassed by it because we just did our job. We were doing what Americans are supposed to do, and that's help, not hurt.
I'd like to thank both of you for coming on and sharing your story, and I know that this is obviously very hard, like you said, never talking about this, and I just really appreciate y'all coming on and doing this.
My pleasure.
Thank you guys for watching. This is another episode of At Mac, a special episode for the Oklahoma City bombing. Thank you.